Welcome, friends. This is A Course in Miracles Palm Beach Study Group. Tonight we're starting Chapter 10, The Idols of Sickness. We're going to start with the introduction. In the book, it's on page 181 in the text. Nothing beyond yourself can make you fearful or loving, because nothing is beyond you. Time and eternity are both in your mind and will conflict until you perceive time solely as a means to regain eternity. You cannot do this as long as you believe that anything happening to you is caused by factors outside yourself. You must learn that time is solely at your disposal and that nothing in the world can take this responsibility from you. You can violate God's laws in your imagination, but you cannot escape from them. They were established for your protection and are as inviolable as your safety. Well, there's a lot of information there in that very first paragraph. First of all, that there's nothing beyond ourselves, which means that you cannot perceive time solely as a means. You must perceive time solely as a means to regain eternity. In other words, the time that we're spending, that we're experiencing as time, should be spent in the pursuit of taking us to where time no longer exists and we're back into the eternal, which is where we started, which is where we came from, which is where we truly are. The thought that we're in space and time is just an illusion. That is the ego world. Let's go on. God created nothing beside you, and nothing beside you exists, for you are part of him. What except him can exist? Nothing beyond him can happen, because nothing except him is real. Your creations add to him as you do, but nothing is added that is different, because everything has always been. What can upset you except the ephemeral? And how can the ephemeral be real if you are God's only creation and he created you eternal? Your holy mind establishes everything that happens to you. Every response you make to everything you perceive is up to you, because your mind determines your perception of it. Now, to a lot of people, the Course can sound like double speak lots of times, like, on the surface, it sounds like it's contradicting itself, or that it's talking left and right at the same time. But actually, if you follow the logic of what it's saying, you see that it is very logical. So God created nothing except us, and so nothing except us exists. We are the child of God, and we are within him. So there's nothing that can possibly be beyond him because he is everything. He is the all in all. So now what we create with love, we add to God, as God added to himself by creating us out of love. And whatever we create out of love, because we are creators, the child is like the father, and so we can create too. What we create out of love, it's incorporated into the wholeness. But nothing's added that's different from God, because nothing that is different from God exists. Again, the whole ego world of time and space that we appear to be living in is just a dream. It's an illusion. It has no reality whatsoever. And so it is not a part of God. And then there's one more paragraph to this introduction, so I'll continue. God does not change his mind about you, for he is not uncertain of himself. And what he knows can be known because he does not know it only for himself. He created you for himself, but he gave you the power to create for yourself, so you would be like him. That is why your mind is holy. Can anything exceed the love of God? Can anything then exceed your will? Nothing can reach you from beyond it, because being in God, you encompass everything. Believe this, and you will realize how much it is up to you. When anything threatens your peace of mind, ask yourself, has God changed his mind about me? Then accept his decision, for it is indeed changeless, and refuse to change your mind about yourself. God will never decide against you, or he would be deciding against himself. So sentence 8 says, believe this, and you will realize how much it is up to you. And I always tell people, whatever you believe to be true is true for you. So if you believe you're just an insignificant little human being, then that's what will be true for you. And if you believe that you are the Son of God, that you are an eternal being, then that will be true for you. Whatever you believe is what becomes true for you. Now, are there any questions or comments?
Yes.
Ed?
Okay. He's using the term ephemeral, which I guess means short term, short time, a short time. How does that work here? I don't understand. What can upset you except the ephemeral? Ephemeral is a short period of time. What does that doesn't make any sense to me right now.
Okay, substitute the word ego for ephemeral. What can upset you except the ego? And how can the ego be real if you are God's only creation? Because time is of the ego. God is eternal. There is no time or space in God's reality. Time and space exist in the ego. And the ego is ephemeral because compared to eternity, time and space are just a very small part in relation to that. The ego was created by us, and eventually the ego will disappear as each of us rejoins the eternal spirit. That piece of the ego will disappear, and eventually everybody will reach that point. That's the promise that is made to us. And at that point, the ego will disappear completely. And then all of time and space will disappear. And nothing will be left except what was always there, which is God's eternity.
Okay. And one more thing, I know I've had a question about this before. Our creations, our individual creations, what are we creating? I need to.
Whatever we create with love. I mean, we create a lot of things because we create with hatred too, but those fortunately do not last. They're of the ego and they will pass. But what we create out of love, friendships, relationships, caring, sharing, forgiveness, it's like, don't think of it in terms of a physical creation. It's a spiritual creation.
Good, thank you. Okay.
It's on a mind level. It's on a spirit level.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? David, Helen? Yes, David.
I find when I
Oh, go ahead, David.
Thank you. I find when I share love, it grows.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a connection, and as I say, sometimes you have to fake it until you make it. But love is there. It's just we have to, we all have to wake up to it, and it's in each one of us, and it's something that needs to be shared, so we all can connect and be peaceful and loving.
Thank you. Yes. Helen.
I had a question about the first paragraph when it says, it talks about God's law. For some reason, I was hoping later on in the paragraph, they were going to list a list of laws, but not to be. So what is a reference there?
Well, first of all, this is the introduction, so there's a whole chapter to follow.
Okay.
And I don't, God's laws are like not the 10 Commandments. They're not numbered.
Right.
They're not written down in law books. God's law basically just refers to the law of love. God's law says, operate out of love and forgiveness, be peaceful, be kind to one another, realize that everyone is equal unto yourself, that you're all brothers and sisters, that there's really only one of you. God's laws are eternal and everything that's spiritual. And when it says you can violate God's laws, in other words, we can we can do evil things. We can hate and judge and be vindictive and what have you in the ego world. But he says, but it's in your imagination. In other words, it's confined to the ego world. All of that negativity that's created in the ego world is confined to the ego world. It doesn't seep out into God's world.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Was there something else, Ed?
No, that was it. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you. All righty then, we are going to go on to section 1, at home in God. You do not know your creations simply because you would decide against them as long as your mind is split. And to attack what you have created is impossible. But remember that it is as impossible for God. The law of creation is that you love your creations as yourself because they are part of you. Everything that was created is therefore perfectly safe because the laws of God protect it by his love. Any part of your mind that does not know this has banished itself from knowledge because it has not met its conditions. Who could have done this but you? Recognize this gladly, for in this recognition lies the realization that your banishment is not of God and therefore does not exist. So what I have to say about that is this, and the Course is clearly teaching us that it's our responsibility. Our lives are our responsibility. What we believe is true for each and every one of us. We have free will. We can choose, and we do choose. Every second of every moment of every day, we're making the choices. And we can choose between two things, spirit and ego. And a split mind is a mind that hasn't decided on which way to go yet. They want to be spiritual on the one hand, on the other hand, they want to do ego things. So their mind is split. And the law, we see that word again, sentence 3, the law of creation, or in other words, one of God's laws, is that you love your creations as yourself. And, Jesus said that. He said, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So, that's the same idea. So that's the law. And what God created is perfectly safe. And what ego created doesn't even exist. It's just illusion. So the word creation here is the way the Course is using it. They're using it that only God can create. So when it says the word creation, they're talking about God's creation. The ego doesn't create. The ego just throws up smoke screens, illusions, magic tricks, dreams, they're ephemeral. And well, that's basically it. Any questions, comments? Well, let's go on then. Paragraph 2. You are at home in God, dreaming of exile, but perfectly capable of awakening to reality. Is it your decision to do so? You recognize from your own experience that what you see in dreams you think is real while you are asleep. Yet the instant you waken, you realize that everything that seemed to happen in the dream did not happen at all. You do not think this strange, even though all the laws of what you awakened to were violated when you slept. Is it not possible that you merely shifted from one dream to another without really waking? Boy, this is the whole course in a nutshell. And I've used this example many times in the past. We're the child of God, we're in eternity, but we're sleeping safely in our beds, and we're dreaming. And that dream is called the ego world. We are home in God, dreaming of exile, dreaming of the ego, but perfectly capable of awakening to reality, which is spirit. Spirit is real, ego's illusion. Is it your decision to do so? You have free will. You must decide. You have a choice. You can decide for spirit, or you can decide for ego. That's the choice you have. There's nothing in between. It's one or the other, and it's your choice. You have free will. No one's going to make you. No one's going to force you. Spirit is not going to insist. Spirit will guide you and help you along if you choose spirit, but it never will force itself upon you, because God does not force himself upon his son. And then it simply says, we've all had the experience of dreaming, and while we're sleeping, and while we're in the dream, we think it's real, and then we wake up. Well, it's the same thing. We're actually in eternity, and we're dreaming, and we think this ego dream is real, but eventually we'll wake up, and then poof, it'll disappear. It'll like, oh, wow, I was dreaming. Oh, I'm glad that's over. I had a nightmare. I thought there were bombs falling on me. So it's the same thing. Yes, David.
John, what wakes us up?
We wake ourselves up by choosing spirit, by forsaking the ego. We wake ourselves up by loving and forgiving and being helpful and peaceful and kind. That's how we wake ourselves up. The more we do it, the more awake we become.
I try to wake people up and they don't want to be woken up.
Well, you have to be like spirit. You can teach and you can guide, but you can't force. You can't try to wake them up. You can just example yourself. You can be an example like Jesus did. He was himself. He was his spiritual self. And if you got it, you got it. If you followed him, you followed him. But he didn't put a rope around your neck and dragged you in and said, no, you gotta do what I say.
I am the light.
You are the light. You are the light of the world. Anyone else?
That I just want to say one other thing. What you just said about be the example is, I asked somebody on Facebook, and they came back with that same answer, that people learn by example.
Mhm.
You can't. Their ego blocks them from, even when they know that someone else's answer is correct. The ego blocks them.
Well, and I've said this in the past too. I'm a great believer in silent prayer. I know that there are people that are not ready to hear my words, but that doesn't mean I can't send them my words of truth and love mentally from my mind to their mind. Eventually, everybody will wake up. That's the promise we've been given. So all we can do is try to wake ourselves up the best that we can. And in that, we are exempling to other people. And what you say or do today may not awaken something in them for another 10, 20, 30 years or so, or maybe not until their next lifetime. But that doesn't mean that you're not being effective. You have to look at the long picture. It's a long game. Okay, paragraph 3. Would you bother to reconcile what happened in conflicting dreams? Or would you dismiss both together if you discovered that reality is in accord with neither? You do not remember being awake. When you hear the Holy Spirit, you may feel better because loving then seems possible to you, but you do not remember yet what it once was so, that it once was so. And it is in this remembering that you will know it can be so again. What is possible has not yet been accomplished. Yet what has once been is so now, if it is eternal. When you remember, you will know that what you remember is eternal and therefore is now. The problem is that everybody in the world is suffering from amnesia. We just don't remember that we're spiritual beings. We just don't remember that we're the Son of God. We just don't remember living in eternity. Remember before we created the ego. We just don't remember. And that's what we're trying to achieve now. We're trying to get over our amnesia. We're trying to remember who our true selves are. Paragraph 4. You will remember everything the instant you desire it wholly. Or if to desire wholly is to create, you will have willed away the separation, returning your mind simultaneously to your Creator and your creations. Knowing them, you will have no wish to sleep, but only the desire to waken and be glad. Dreams will be impossible because you will want only truth. And being at last your will, it will be yours. So again, that's the promise that the Course makes to us, that we will remember. And we'll remember instantly when our desire is whole, when we've completely ridded ourselves of all ego, thoughts, and feelings. When we've completely eliminated the ego mind from our minds, then it'll be an instantaneous remembering and desiring. And it's through our will, our free will, that we can will away the separation. Remember, we created the separation to begin with. We created the ego separation by thinking we could separate ourselves from God. And in terms of the Bible and the New Testament and Jesus, this was all reflected in the parable of the son. What son? Starts with a P. The prodigal son. The prodigal son thought he could separate himself from his father, and so he went off. But what he encountered was all the ego world, the hell and the hate and the this and the that, and nothing that worked out really well and all that. He finally gave up. He said, I don't want this anymore. I'm going to go back to my father. And when he did, the father said, oh, my son is back. Yay, let's throw a party. We have reached the end of section 1, and we're going to end for tonight with this. So, any questions or comments, reflections upon what we read tonight? Go right ahead. First come, first serve.
I keep on getting the sense that this is very deep inside. And for me, it's not always the access to the availability of love and spirit is not every day for me. It comes in little spurts. And in reading these paragraphs, I just keep on feeling that there's so much more than we can even imagine. I mean, it's one of the deepest ever things that when we experience spirit on a minute basis is only a little sampling of actually what's there. And it seems to me that we don't even tap into it. That's the sense I'm getting when I read this.
Thank you, Helen. I'll just respond by saying there are many people who can't even read this because they're nowhere near ready to read this. But you are reading this. And although it may seem like just a little bit, and that you only have that sense of spirit, little pieces of time, the important thing is that you are on the path. You are reading this. You are engaged in the journey. And that's the important thing, because the higher up the mountain you climb, the closer you get to the top. And the more you practice something, the easier it gets. So the more you endeavor to act spiritually in your life and have spirit in your life and realize love and peace and forgiveness in your life, the more and more of that you'll achieve. And so don't be, what's the word I want?
I'm not discouraged. Don't get me
Right,
wrong.
don't be discouraged.
I'm not. I'm just getting over being sick. So being in a place of having been so sick for, a good 2 weeks, has affected me. Has affected me. Let me just put it that way.
Right.
And reading this is just, I just love it so much.
Okay. Well, hopefully it's words that are reassuring to you that you're on the right path. And that
And I did reach the mountain a couple of weeks ago.
right.
I was at the top of the mountain.
Oh, wow.
It was beautiful.
All righty. Well,
Thank you, John. Thank
you're
you so much for your input.
You're welcome, Helen. And Ed, any last thoughts? You have to unmute if you want to speak.
You've answered my questions. I'm good.
Oh,
Thank you.
all righty then.
Okay.
Well, then, thank you, Helen and Ed and Dave, who apparently had to leave in the last couple of minutes. So let's end with a moment of silence, please.